You're 14 years old. Your mother's hands shake as she tucks flowers into your hair. Your father watches you the way a merchant watches cargo being loaded onto a ship. Your brother won't meet your eyes. Everyone keeps saying this is a blessing, that you belong to the goddess now, that this is an honor your family worked years to afford. But here's what nobody mentions. The older women standing near the temple entrance refuse to look at you. They know something you're about to learn. Before the sun sets tonight, a stranger will place a coin in your lap. And once that silver touches your skin, you can never refuse what comes next. Welcome to Babylon. Welcome to the Temple of Ishtar. Welcome to the sacred ritual that historians still argue about because the truth is too disturbing to accept. And you're about to discover why this practice was deliberately erased from every history textbook. Before we step through those temple gates, I need you to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button, because what you're about to hear survived in clay tablets, in ancient Greek accounts, in archaeological evidence that makes scholars deeply uncomfortable. This channel exists to reveal the histories they tried to bury. Your subscription keeps these forgotten voices alive. Now let's follow a girl named Beltane into Ishtar's temple and watch what really happened when religion became the mask for something far darker. The temple rises above you like a mountain carved from human ambition. The ziggurat steps climb toward the sky, each level painted in colors that hurt to look at under the afternoon sun. Up close, it smells of incense, boiled barley, and smoke from offerings that never stop burning. Priests move through the courtyard like shadows, with purposes you don't understand yet. Slaves carry baskets so heavy their shoulders have reshaped around the weight. And somewhere inside, behind curtains soaked in perfume, girls, just like you, are learning what it means to serve the goddess. A priest places a rope crown in your hands. It's soft, braided from plant fiber, lighter than you expected. Another priest writes your name on a clay tablet with quick, practiced strokes. And on a stone altar nearby, you notice a single silver coin sitting there as if it's been waiting for someone specific. You want to believe this is different from what you're imagining. The temple is beautiful. The priests speak with gentle voices. Other girls are here too, some older, some younger, and they're not crying or struggling, they're learning hymns. They're being taught to read sacred symbols pressed into wet clay. They're being given clean linen to wear and perfumed oil for their skin. From the outside, this looks like education. It looks like status. It looks like maybe your family was right, and this really is a blessing. The Greek historian Herodotus described what he saw here with disturbing bluntness. Women seated in rows, rope crowns marking them as available, men walking past choosing whichever one caught their eye. Modern scholars insist he must have misunderstood, that he was a foreigner who didn't grasp the sacred nuances. But the clay tablets don't argue. They list names. They record payments. Silver exchanged. Grain delivered. They were written to count transactions, not to preserve sacred mysteries. Here's what changes everything. Here's the moment when this story stops looking like religious devotion and starts looking like something else entirely. Beltane learns the business quickly. First comes training. Music lessons where she learns to move her hands in ways that suggest invitation. Dance instruction where every gesture carries, meaning she's still decoding. A woman named Iltani teaches her how to roll a cosmetic stone across her face to create a sheen of oil that catches lamplight. A boy with ink-stained fingers adds her name to a registry tablet and whispers a single word, Kadisu, title and trap, in one breath. The priests explain the theology in patient, reasonable voices. To please Ishtar is to please the city. To please the city is to secure harvests, births, favorable trade routes. The logic is tidy and clean and makes perfect sense, until you realize what pleasing Ishtar actually requires. But by then, the temple doors have already closed behind you, and nobody mentioned they lock from the inside. They call the Kadisu priestesses. Officially, that's what you are now. You're trained to read sacred texts. You memorize hymns until you can chant them in your sleep. You wear clean linen that marks you as belonging to the temple. You have legal standing that protects your rights on paper. Property rights? The ability to earn wages. Protection under Babylonian law that explicitly recognizes your status. From the outside, this looks like privilege. Your family probably believes you've secured a position most girls could never access. And technically, they're right. The law does protect you. The law says you belong to no man. But here's what the law doesn't record. The law doesn't record consent. The law doesn't record the word no. The law doesn't record any mechanism for leaving. You belong to no man, yes, but you belong entirely to the temple. And the temple has very specific ideas about how you'll serve. For about 3 days, Beltane actually believed this might work. She watched the older priestesses move through the temple with confidence, saw their names pressed into important clay documents, noticed how priests consulted them on ritual details. Maybe this really was a path upward. Maybe she could learn enough, become important enough, that the other aspects wouldn't matter as much. Maybe the temple would protect her the way the priests promised. That hope lasted exactly until the sun set on her 4th day. Then the lanterns were lit, the outer doors closed, and men began entering through a different entrance, one she hadn't noticed before. Merchants with covered faces, soldiers returning from duty, travelers carrying silver or cloth from distant roads. They didn't linger in the outer courtyard. They paid priests at a small table, and then those priests guided them behind low curtains where the Kadisu waited in a separate chamber. This is where devotion becomes routine. This is where sacred language reveals its true function. Coins pass from hand to hand. Names get recorded on tablets. A portion gets set aside for ritual offerings to Ishtar. Everything else flows into the temple's storage rooms, where grain and silver and wine and captured human labor all get counted with the same administrative precision. Beltane watches an older woman emerge from behind those curtains. She moves carefully, practiced, with a coin resting in her palm and eyes trained not to settle on anything too long. No one shames her, no one mocks her. The city respects her for having served the goddess. And yet, her future has already been decided. She will not marry the way other women marry. She will not raise children in a household that belongs to her. Her life has narrowed to a single track that was carved the moment the first coin touched her hand. Some Kadisu call this a position. Others call it survival. Beltane is starting to understand it's neither. It's a system that doesn't require anyone's opinion about it to function perfectly. But what happens next will show her that even this routine has deeper, darker layers she hasn't seen yet. At night, when incense smoke clears and the temple settles into quiet, Beltane lies on her narrow mat and tries to calculate how long she's been here. Weeks? Months? Time moves differently inside these walls, where bells decide when you wake, and rations decide when you eat, and names spoken by priests decide when you serve. Nobody threatens her, nobody chains her to anything. But nothing belongs to her either, not her time, not her body. Not even the small clay tablet with her name on it, which lives in a storage room she's not allowed to enter. A woman who cannot leave is not staying by choice, no matter how many hymns they teach her to sing. Iltani sits beside her one evening on the terrace, where Kadisu are allowed to take air after sunset. Moonlight flattens the city into pale shapes below them. "You understand it now," Iltani says quietly. "How this place works?" Beltane nods. She understands that the rope crown means available. She understands that once silver is offered, acceptance is automatic. She understands that the tablets recording these transactions get stored permanently, creating a history that doesn't include her voice or her choices, only her participation. "Do you still think we're priestesses?" Iltani asks. Beltane hesitates because she wants the answer to be yes. She wants to believe the hymns matter, that the theology is real, that Ishtar actually cares about any of this. But Iltani smiles with an expression worn smooth by years of answers that lead nowhere. "We're necessary," she says. "Necessary to the temple." necessary to men who come here and leave lighter, necessary enough to keep, never enough to release. Then comes an announcement that changes everything. Once a year during the New Year festival, the temple prepares the sacred marriage, a ritual meant to secure the city's prosperity for another cycle. It's dressed in elaborate hymns and symbols spoken of as divine union and blessing. Inside the walls, everyone knows it's proof. Proof that the goddess's favor has been purchased again. Proof that Babylon's power comes from transaction, not devotion. The temple does not accept a refusal from anyone. Not priests, not kings, certainly not Kadisu. And this year, for reasons nobody explains, Beltani's name has been called. Not to serve in the usual way, to prepare the inner chamber for the highest ritual of the entire year. A bowl of scented oil is placed in her hands. Her hair is arranged with flowers and gold thread. The rope crown is adjusted carefully. The air feels heavier, as if the walls themselves are listening. Even Iltani watches without speaking, and that silence tells Beltani more than any explanation could. Something fundamental is about to shift, and once you cross certain thresholds in this temple, you never cross back. The preparation chamber is dim, lit by lamps that cast shadows shaped like waiting. Stone lions carved into the walls stare with open jaws, Ishtar's beasts frozen mid-roar. The platform at the center has been draped in cloth, reserved for the highest rituals of state and faith. Beltani's hands shake as she pours oil across the stone surface. It spreads dark and reflective, catching lamplight like a held breath. She can feel eyes on her back, priests watching to ensure every gesture is correct. She's prepared lamps before, she's prepared rooms, tonight she's being prepared, and the difference is something she feels in her bones before anyone says a word. Footsteps echo beyond the doorway, slow, deliberate, heavy with purpose. The man chosen to stand in for the divine enters the chamber. King or noble, the distinction doesn't matter anymore. His presence shifts the air, makes the room feel smaller than it did moments before. Beltani keeps her eyes lowered, just as she was taught, but she feels his gaze settle on her skin like weight she can't shake off. The priests circle them both. Their chant deepens, becomes something that vibrates in her chest. The chamber seems to close in, walls pressing closer, ceiling dropping lower. Then a voice speaks, calm, certain, final. Tonight you serve the goddess in body and symbol. The land depends on this. The city depends on this. A sentence so old, it sounds unquestionable. A sentence that assumes there's only one possible response. Beltani lowers her eyes and the ritual begins. What happens next was never written down in detail. The temple did not record specifics meant to be sealed, only fragments survive. Hymns that speak of prepared beds, verses praising union and fertility. But everything in Beltani's life shifts after that night, in ways she won't fully understand for months. The next morning, the high priestess embraces her, not with warmth, but with approval. Priests nod as they pass. A scribe adds a mark beside her name on a tablet she cannot read, something that looks like recognition or warning or both. Even Iltani looks at her differently now, with an expression that combines acknowledgement and pity. You've seen the heart of the temple, Iltani whispers, and the temple has seen you. No explanation follows. None is needed. Once certain thresholds are crossed, there is no return. But this recognition comes with a cost Beltani hasn't calculated yet, and that cost will define the rest of her short, recorded life. The months after the sacred marriage settle into a rhythm that leaves no room for questions. Morning hymns before dawn. Oil baths that smell like cedar and myrrh. Lessons in music, scent, and the specific ways of lowering your gaze so it becomes invitation instead of refusal. Inside the walls, the Kadisu are praised as sacred. Outside, they're spoken of in lower voices. They move between reverence and use, without ever fully belonging to either world. Some of the older women whisper when priests leave the chamber. Ishtar owns us, one mutters. Another shakes her head. The temple does. Ishtar only signs off. Beltane doesn't laugh. She's learned that the difference between those two answers is the difference between faith and survival. And survival requires acknowledging what faith cannot fix. The temple is a city within the city. Storerooms stacked floor to ceiling with grain. Jars sealed with silver and stamped with ownership marks. Names pressed into clay tablets and filed away in archives that will outlast everyone who created them. The Kadisu move through this machinery as essential and unnoticed as the gears themselves. The law recognizes them. It grants privileges. It lists protections. It does not grant departure. An accountant once told Beltane she brings good fortune to the temple. She looked past him at the overflowing storage rooms and understood what that praise actually measured. Her value calculated in grain shipments and silver weights. Her body converted into inventory that produces predictable returns. What weighs on her most is not the rituals themselves, which become numbing through repetition, but the hours afterward, when the incense thins, when the chants fade, when the city's noise returns beyond the walls, and she remembers there's a world out there she can no longer access. That's when the temple feels smallest. That's when the future disappears entirely. No one here speaks of later years. Names are recorded on tablets with careful precision. Then one day they're not. Older women vanish quietly. Their sleeping mats get folded. Their space is filled with newer girls who don't ask questions yet. When Beltane asks where they go, Iltani touches her hair gently and says, "To the goddess," but her eyes tell a different story. They tell the story of women who stopped being useful, women whose bodies aged past commercial value, women the temple consumed completely and then erased without ceremony or explanation. And Beltane realizes with perfect clarity that this is her future too. The only question is how long until her name stops appearing in the records. Then something shifts. It happens gradually, so slowly that Beltane almost doesn't notice at first. Her name is called less frequently for evening services. When the rope crowns are distributed, hers stays on its hook more often than not. The priests still smile at her, but the smiles have changed quality. They've become the kind you give someone who's already been replaced. Newer girls arrive, younger, fresher, with eyes that haven't learned to go empty yet. The system requires constant renewal. And Beltane has been here long enough to understand what renewal actually means. The temple doesn't discard you dramatically. There are no ceremonies of dismissal, no formal release papers. You simply fade from the tablets. Your entries thin, then stop. Your name appears less often, then not at all. A merchant from the eastern trade routes visits one evening. He's been coming to the temple for years, always requesting experienced Kadisu who know what's expected without explanation. Tonight, the priest guides him past Beltane's curtain to one of the newer girls. The merchant doesn't even glance in Beltane's direction. She's become invisible without leaving the room. Iltani finds her later sitting on the terrace where they've had so many conversations about the machinery that consumes them both. It happens to everyone, Iltani says quietly. The temple takes what it requires. Then it moves on. The tablets show everything with perfect bureaucratic precision. Duties fulfilled, offerings prepared, festivals served, then nothing. She pauses, looking out over Babylon's glowing streets. We weren't supposed to survive this. We were supposed to be useful for a few years and then disappear so quietly that no one would ever have to acknowledge what happened to us. This is how countless lives ended inside Ishtar's walls. Not with drama or violence or scandal, with absence. Scholars argue about this practice because argument is safer than conclusion. They debate whether Herodotus misunderstood, whether sacred prostitution is too harsh a term, whether the Kadisu participated willingly or under coercion. But the tablets don't argue. They show a system that functioned smoothly by consuming women without noise, payments recorded, roles assigned, rituals regulated. Bodies folded into law and ledger and left there until they stopped producing value. Some women entered willingly, desperate for any path that might lead upward. Others were given by families with no other options, sold to the temple as the only alternative to starvation. A few gained real status, becoming high priestesses who administered the system rather than serving within it. Most faded without trace, their names briefly pressed into clay and then forgotten. Beltane lived in the middle, shaped by a system that elevated her just enough to make her useful, then prepared to swallow her whole. But there's one final revelation she hasn't reached yet. One last truth about what happened to women whose names stopped appearing in temple records. Beltane's final entry on the temple tablets is dated to the harvest season. A single line noting she assisted with festival preparations. Then nothing. No record of departure. No indication of where she went or what became of her. The tablet simply moves on to the next name, the next transaction, the next piece of inventory entering the system. This is how the temple erased lives, not by destroying records, but by simply stopping the recording, by treating human beings like seasonal workers whose contract had expired, here one day, gone the next, and the machinery never pausing to acknowledge the difference. History does not preserve voices like Beltane's. The temple recorded grain and silver and livestock and land. It did not record fear or hope or regret. It did not record the moment when a woman realized she would never leave these walls. It did not record the calculations she made about which would be worse, continuing to serve or simply giving up. And yet the silence around her name speaks with perfect clarity. It tells us she was never meant to be remembered, only counted. It tells us why later generations tried to bury these rituals beneath metaphor and denial, not because they were small or insignificant, but because they revealed too much about what civilization actually costs, about who pays that cost, about how easily societies can convert human suffering into sacred duty and administrative procedure. The temple is gone now. The ziggurat reduced to dust and excavation sites. The chants silenced. The stone lions broken beneath centuries of sand. But the questions remain, sharp and uncomfortable. What did Beltane believe in the end? Did she still trust the goddess? Did she hope for escape? Or did she learn what Iltani had learned, that hope itself is another thing the temple takes from you, slowly and completely? History will never answer. The tablets record transactions, not emotions. They preserve the system's efficiency while erasing its human cost. And that's exactly how the system was designed to function. You weren't supposed to hear Beltane's name. She wasn't supposed to have a story. She was supposed to be a line item in an accounting ledger, briefly useful and then quietly erased. But her silence is louder than any testimony could be. Because her silence is shared by millions of women whose names were pressed into clay and then deliberately forgotten. And that erasure tells us everything we need to know about who gets remembered in history and why. Now, here's what makes this truly devastating. This wasn't an aberration. This wasn't Babylon going rogue or one civilization behaving unusually cruelly. This was normal. For centuries, this system functioned openly, regulated by law, taxed by the state, praised by poets and philosophers. Nobody hid it. Nobody apologized for it. It was simply considered the natural order of things, the way temples generated revenue, the way cities secured divine favor, the way women's bodies were converted into economic and religious resources without anyone having to acknowledge the conversion was happening. The genius of the system was in its language. By calling it sacred, by wrapping it in theology and ritual, Babylon made exploitation invisible even while conducting it in full public view. And here's the question we have to ask ourselves. How many modern systems function exactly the same way? How many industries today convert human bodies into commercial resources while using language that makes the conversion sound like something else? How many institutions claim to protect people while actually consuming them? How many times do we celebrate structures as sacred or necessary or just the way things work without examining who those structures devour to keep functioning? The Temple of Ishtar is gone, but the logic that powered it is everywhere. In systems that claim to honor people while profiting from their exploitation, in institutions that present themselves as protective while extracting everything they can, in language designed to obscure what's actually happening so that participants don't have to feel guilty about their role in the machinery. Beltani's name appears on a clay tablet dated approximately 2,700 years ago. That tablet was discovered by archaeologists in the 19th century, translated, cataloged, and filed away in a museum archive where almost no one will ever see it. Her name is Beltani. She was brought to Ishtar's temple as a girl. She served, she was erased. That's all we know. That's all we were ever meant to know. But if you want to pay tribute to Beltani and to the countless women history only counted, never remembered, I need you to do something. Leave her name in the comments. Write Beltani. Just her name. Because for 2,700 years, she existed only as a data point in a system designed to consume her. Today, you can make her visible again. You can ensure that at least once, someone sees her name and knows that she mattered beyond her commercial value, that she was a complete human being with thoughts and fears and hopes that were never recorded, that her life had meaning even though the system insisted it didn't. Share this video. Make sure others learn what happened inside those temple walls, because the only way to prevent this pattern from repeating is to stop pretending it's ancient history. This isn't about Babylon. This is about every system that ever learned to sanctify its own cruelty. And those systems are still operating today, just wearing different names. Will you be the one who finally stops kneeling at that altar? The choice, as always, is yours.